Okay. Perfect. So I'm Laura, the main trainer on the course, and I've asked Katie to join us. So this is Katie, who is one of the current students. So she's doing the course at the minute, which means she's probably the one going to do most of the talking rather than me about how it is or what it is, and how it is. Is there any particular kind of burning question that you have in your mind, so that I can include it as we go through, or do you want to kind of just see as we go what kind of comes up?
I guess my main thing is to try and I know I can probably Google this, but I haven't. And that is, like, obviously there's lots of different places where you could do a 200-hour yoga training, and what, like, are they mostly essentially the same kind of qualification, and it's just got to do with who's running it and how you feel about the course, or is there actually differences in them and what you get out of it at the end?
That is a fantastic question, because it's a minefield. It's
yeah.
And in fact, since COVID, now we are in Ireland are getting, well, I'm getting bombarded with people looking to sell me teacher training from all over the world. So suddenly it's like, it's even worse. I mean, it was bad, but it's even more difficult now to navigate through what it is and where we go.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so what I'll do is I will sort of touch along that, so I can kind of give you an idea as we go through the syllabus where things might be the same, where things might be different. And then in terms of the qualification and how it works, where you can use it, all that kind of stuff, I'll go into that then, and how that would be different as well.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Cool.
Valerie, have you anything that's kind of front and center that you want me to make sure I address?
For me, it's just really, I suppose, how much time I will have to dedicate it to it outside of your hour each week and the Saturdays and that sort of thing. It's just to fit in with the family schedule, I suppose, and just to see how it will work with everybody here. Perfect.
Well, we've got I mean, Katie's just moved house. We've got so I'll let her talk about that. So that is perfect. Because that is, it's real. I mean, that's the reality. And as I'll talk a little bit about why I set up the course the way, the pattern the way it is. And a lot of that has got to do with me trying to fit my training into my life when I was doing different trainings and how it affected it. And that's how I kind of came up with this model. Plus, thank COVID is also been a gift at supporting me embrace stuff that I didn't really want to embrace before, but so perfect. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk a little bit about myself, just to kind of give you an idea of who I am and where I'm coming from. I'll talk a little bit about the course, and at that point I'm going to answer both of those main areas. I'm going to ask Katie to chime in as much as she wants or can in about the different areas as we can. I'm just going to use the structure of the course to kind of give us a structure. If at any point you have a question, just shout it out, because the point is to get your questions answered. So you can read the website separately. So it's really to get as much advantage of having me and Katie here tonight. So really get those questions answered. That's kind of it. So don't be waiting until the end. If something crosses your mind, follow it out. Yeah. Cool. And then I have a couple of questions that people who I knew couldn't come have emailed me as well. So I have a couple of their questions as well that we can kind of do at the end. Okay, so I suppose the first thing is just to introduce me. So I'm Laura, and I have been, I found yoga, I suppose about, that's a while ago now, about 33 years ago, when I went to college. And I just went into a room to study, and there were these people standing on their heads, and I thought, oh, what that's about. I didn't even know what yoga, I'd never heard of yoga, didn't know anything about yoga. And even when people told me what it was, I still didn't know. But we went back the next week, and I convinced a couple of my friends to come with me because I was too scared to go by myself. And actually, it was two blokes that came with me, surprisingly enough. So the three of us pretty much did yoga the whole way through our degree and our masters. And then that was kind of the start. I still didn't know anything about yoga. We just turned up and we did whatever we were, whatever we did. And I just really loved it. I still couldn't stand in my head, just the particular type of yoga we were doing the first thing every class was to do a headstand. It's a particular type of yoga, not for the, you know, not one I would do now. But anyway, after about 6 years, I still couldn't do a headstand. So, you know, let's just say I wouldn't be one of the kind of gifted flexi kind of people. And then I travel a little bit, but I was continuing my yoga practice. When I started working a corporate job, I took on meditation as well, and had quite a serious meditation practice, mainly because I was just so stressed. I am not anymore. I'm a recovering stress ball, but I was one of those, you know, those kids that like take everything really seriously. And it's like, you know, if the teacher said sit, you know, it's like, am I sitting properly? I was like that. I was a real kind of, that was my personality. I was a stress ball. So hence meditation was such a lifeline. And so for me, it's always been both. Yoga and meditation have been kind of mulling along themselves together. And then I burnt out in my corporate job. Then I did a load of other jobs. I was in education in IT and finance, and then I burnt out there. And then I moved into psychology, went to study psychology, and then I had a load of kids. I didn't have a load of kids. I've only got 3 kids. And took on other work and set up a training company there, and again burnt out. Then I got involved in teaching. My kids brought me into the Steiner school, so I became a primary school teacher for a while in a very small school until I burnt out again. And after about the 3rd time of burning out, and particularly the last one where, I mean, I loved all my jobs, but particularly my last one when I was teaching, it was a really spiritual environment. It was a really healing environment, but and I really loved the work I was doing. It was really fulfilling work, but somehow I wasn't putting myself in the picture. I was making all sorts of insane sacrifices, not unhappily. I was really happy to do it. It wasn't, but the school was in the south of Kildare, and I was driving mad hours. I had little kids, and I just burnt out. And so even though yoga had been with me all along, at that point when I was just trying to figure out what was I going to do next, my mom also had passed, and I knew what I was doing wasn't sustainable. So what I wanted to do was to choose a career that supported me, forced me to put myself in the picture. So that, so I always knew I would become a yoga teacher at some stage. Like I'd kind of retire and become a yoga teacher. That was kind of I just loved yoga. So that was never, but it wasn't. For me, it was very much about finding a way of being in the world that really supported me, take care of myself, and yet be able to offer support to others, because that was kind of that was really important. And that's kind of how I ended up being a full-time yoga teacher. And yeah, so I was very much in the yoga therapy side. I was trained by Yoga Therapy Ireland, so a little bit like Jer, you know, because she would also be from the she has not physio, I've forgotten what it is, you know, physical therapy.
Yeah.
So so coming from that perspective, using yoga to help support our bodies, to heal our bodies, to support our minds, that's kind of where I would have been coming from. I'd have done a lot of work with one-to-one clients in a therapeutic sort of setting, worked with the elderly. At one point I worked in a clinic. I worked in a clinic with a group of people where one of my students had no independent movement other than moving her eyes, and that was the full amount of movement that she had. And I learned so much from that lady. She was phenomenal, and she could smile. So when I'd arrive, she'd smile, and then we would work with her and work with her carers how to support her physically, you know, in terms of movement of joints and stuff. But in terms of her breath, in terms of her calmness, her stillness, being kind of caught in the body, it was really interesting. And working some multiple sclerosis. There was a whole range of different diagnoses within that clinic that I worked in. And so that was very educational. I also worked in in the gym in Clane in the West Grove. And that was a phenomenal, that was a completely different setup there. You are arriving into who knows where, who knows, you know, so you have everything from the aqua ladies who would come and do their yoga every week, through to the people who were injured. So again, they would be recuperating and they would join the class, through to, at one stage I had martial arts, not a martial arts, a mixed, he fought in a cage. What are those called? Mixed martial arts guys. A cage fighter. Tapped to the loads of
Conor McGregor type.
Exactly. So I had Conor McGregor, and he used to be beside this fantastic lady who was about well, she was probably about 70. I'd say she's about 70, and she used to get the bus up, and it was really cool because she was more flexible than him in certain ways, even though he was really strong. And he reckoned he was old. He must have been at least 30, and he was trying to get all the young fellas into yoga because he knew how hard it is on his body if he wasn't supported. It's fascinating. So I have this kind of a little bit of spectrum where we're coming from in terms of how yoga can be used, how it can be, and how it can support us. And so then I got called into sort of we call it embodied yoga. And originally I thought everything was embodied. I didn't understand how it wasn't embodied. Well, actually, Katie, maybe could you describe how would you language now? This is putting her on the spot, poor girl.
I didn't prepare for this question. As in, like, how does embodied yoga compare, or the yoga that we're doing compare to, like,
just in terms of, because in terms of the movements we do, hatha yoga would be the technical description of what we teach, but I teach it slightly differently, which is what I'm calling embodied. So it's hard for me to language what that means. So I just thought I'd give the hard question to Katie.
Thanks. Okay, so I have done hatha yoga with lots of different teachers, but what we've been kind of working on, and I have been coming to Laura as a student for a couple of years, so I'm kind of very familiar with how she works and what she does. So when we're talking about embodied yoga, we're talking about, for me, it means taking the yoga on the mat, being really present, being really connected in your body and your mind. So it's not, I used to use yoga kind of to get out of my head, just like power through it and stop thinking about things. Whereas when we do it now, we're kind of, you're thinking about the movement more. There's no cop out. There's no kind of like, oh yeah, just do that. You really have to connect with your body, and to do that, you have to tune in. And that's the experience on the mat, but it also means really taking it off the mat and noticing things. So for example, like even today, I noticed I was driving and I was getting quite tight in my shoulder here, and previous Katie would have just ignored that and gone, oh yeah, no, I'll deal with that later. But I actually, as soon as I got home, stopped, paid attention to it, noticed where it was, did a little bit of work on it, totally fine now. But I possibly would have just pushed that out. I wouldn't have really felt it or noticed where it was coming from. I know what caused it. Was a screaming child in the supermarket, but I possibly wouldn't have noticed that in my body before. I wouldn't have made that connection, screaming child in the supermarket, sore shoulder. I would have just gone, oh, I have a sore shoulder, what's that about? And probably would have gone at it, loads of like really into it. Whereas I was able to just release it out with a bit of movement. I was able to tune into what was going on in my head. I was able to let go of the screaming child in the supermarket, and that was an experience that happened. So that it's more, I hate the word holistic because I think it's just so, it's too vague, but it's an approach that takes in everything. It takes in what's going on for you, what's going on in your body, being able to tune your mind into what is happening in the current moment, and notice when stuff, not always like bad stuff, good stuff as well, but notice where that is in your body and where you're holding that. Was that really vague, or?
But I think it is. It's kind of it's something that is definitely more experiential, but it ties into it's really about the science of the body, of where we hold stuff, how we hold stuff, how we create tension. So it's really about, like a bit like Katie says, about being we have all the tools, and most people that will have come to a yoga teacher training will typically have had a number of years working with yoga. So while you you kind of know the poses. It's experiencing them in a different way, interacting with them in a different way, and being able to use them. Yeah, I think that's as good as it. It definitely has
We're
changed.
3 months into the course now, and we're still trying to define what embodied yoga is. It's kind of, you need to experience it to really understand what it is. Like it's a very hard thing to describe, but it really is not just going through the motions. It's being really aware in your body and where you're holding tension, where you're holding your good things and your memories, and there's so much to it. And like I said, we're 3 months in, loving it, but it's quite difficult to put into words.
Language.
Yeah.
So in terms of, if you were to ask me what type of yoga we're doing, it's hatha, but it's hatha with this flavor. But in terms of the poses, so having, in terms of, from your point of view, in terms of what you can teach afterwards, once you have the foundations in hatha, you have the full spectrum, because if you put them together in a reasonably quick sequence, you've got flow yoga, you've got vinyasa yoga. You put them together really slowly and supported, now you've got restorative yoga. If you put them together slow, unsupported, you've got yin yoga. So in terms of the labels, while I am going to talk about it in terms of being embodied yoga and having a somatic experience of it, and that will lead through all of what we teach and how we teach it. In terms of, if you wanted to kind of compare and contrast, it's hatha, which will give you the ability to teach. It's your foundation, and from that foundation, then you can go into whichever mode suits you and suits the kind of people that you want to work with. So, you know, if you're working with teenagers, if you're working with 20-year-olds, if you're working with in an OAP home, if you're working with, it's probably not OAP, it's probably not called that anymore, but if you're working in a care home. So, you know, you will, how you use the tools will be to match your audience, but the tools are the tools. So we kind of go deep into the tools, if that makes sense. Yeah. Cool. So what I might do, if it's okay with you, is I might have a little look, sort of run through I'm going to use the website as a sort of a prop, just to share, just to kind of go through the structure of the course and the flow of the course, so that you can again ask questions, and again we'll get Katie to pop in. So there you go, picture me, surprise, surprise. The early bird, I'll come back to that in a second, because the early bird is pretty cool. What we're looking for, what I'm looking to do is to really allow you meet me and meet, well, Katie's an example of the kind of people that I work with, so that you can see is it a match, because a lot of this is really about hanging out with like-minded people and really finding something that speaks to you. And that's one of the big things that you were asking about in terms of how do you know which course it is. I would say your due diligence is really about finding a teacher that resonates with you. Someone that kind of speaks your language, that you kind of go, yeah, I think she has something interesting to say, or he has something interesting to say, something that I'd like to kind of hang out with and learn a bit more from. Because a lot of that is, for me, it's definitely about getting that match. I'm not, you know, we're not going to learn any fancy headstands. We're not going to learn how to, you know, do backflips. For me, it's much more going, well, you'll see when I go into the syllabus where my focus is in what interests me to teach. And so that's kind of where you're looking at to see which course suits you as such. So this is a little bit, I already talked about that, my background in yoga therapy. And this is, to me, the key thing. It's about finding like-minded people in order to share our passion, because we wouldn't be here if we weren't passionate about it. And we wouldn't be here if we hadn't really got benefit from the yoga that we're doing. So it's how do we get even more benefit? How do we share what we've got? How do we spread? And sharing that doesn't have to necessarily mean teaching a public yoga class. That could just be, you know, like Katie was saying, you know, allowing the child cry and being sympathetic and kind, rather than having it get under your skin. We can teach so many ways. It doesn't have to be actually holding a formal class as such. Some of the kind of reasons that people use is that we don't have a yoga body. Well, you can just look at me, so we don't have to worry about that. That one is sorted. And in actual fact, sometimes having the yoga body, the Instagram body, has a whole range of other difficulties with it, being hypermobile, having overstretched, and done gymnastics, done dance, the injuries that those kind of backgrounds create in our body can actually bring a whole other side of difficulties. And so for me, it's important to understand that so that we can work with people who have what Instagram calls a yoga body, as well as look after ourselves in, for speaking for myself, the non-Instagram yoga body. Having never thought before, that is not a problem. We will take you step by step by step from the tiniest little bit the whole way through. So by the end of the year, you are happy out teaching a public class. Should that be of interest to you? It doesn't have to be of interest to you. A lot of people will do this for their own personal development. And like I say, bring it into their work, into their home, and they can share yoga in it. It doesn't, in many ways. But if teaching a public class is something that you're interested in, we will take you step by step. You don't need any experience beforehand. Oh, not sure if I want to teach. Well, I've already talked about that. Too old and too young. Well, yeah, it's not possible. As the thing is, if you can breathe, you can do yoga. If you can breathe and you can move independently, you can do yoga. If you can do yoga, you can teach yoga. Should that be of interest to you? You will just do it differently, and you'll have wisdom, or you'll have energy, or there's different things that come from different experiences in life.
Yeah. I will say as well, like, I don't actually intend, well, I don't know, maybe I'll end up teaching at some point, but at the moment I don't really have an intention to become a yoga teacher. I'm a primary teacher. I probably use it in the classroom. I also can't touch my heels to the floor in down dog. Shocker. Obviously couldn't possibly be a yoga teacher if you couldn't do that. And that was one of the things I had kind of a reservation about before, is that I had lots of flexibility in some areas, but in other areas, like, I don't have the ability to do that. And like Dora said, like, I can't do a headstand. So, but the way that we're learning to teach, I guess, is that even if I could never do a handstand, I feel I could guide someone through it. So we're learning to teach it in a way that doesn't mean that I have to be able to do it perfectly in order to support someone to learn how to do it, just in case that's something that people are worried about.
So what we will be doing is empowering you to empower your students to make wise decisions, so that you're not just saying, throw yourself up there in a handstand and you'll be grand, and damaging your shoulder. Because a lot of that, and that I suppose is one of the really key things about embodiment, is that people make choices for themselves. We support the students to really sense what's going on in their body, so that they are empowered to make choices, that we no longer become the authority that tells them you should be able to put your shoulder back, you should be able to put your hand out, there's no shoulds, because we have no idea. But that we can empower them to explore and see what feels good for them. Does it feel better? Does it feel worse, etc., and work that way. That's kind of one of the key aspects, I suppose, of coming from an embodied approach, is that we're inspiring our students to be really sensitive to their body and to notice for themselves, today I'm a little bit tired, today I'm a little bit, today I need to move quicker, so I'm going to do the flow quicker than you're doing it. Or, it's really about empowering our students and finding that connection within their own body from themselves. And actually, I was about to say, actually, we have a guest speaker coming on Thursday. We have a number of different guest speakers through it. But on this Thursday, we have a physio whose speciality is in the pelvic floor. And it was really interesting because she's been doing some teaching with us, and then she's going to meet us on Thursday. And one of the things she talks about is how women, one of her biggest difficulties is that women really have no sensitivity to the pelvic floor, and that they can't really sense what's going on. And so this is Sharon talking about it in terms of the pelvic floor, in terms of her work as a physio. But I would say in a lot of the work that we do, this is what we're looking to do, is to really support people. And if we can support them understand and feel what's going on, then they're less likely to pick up the heavy shopping in the half twist or whatever and throw their shoulder out. Or they'll notice that they're starting to get a tight shoulder, and that they can act on it before it becomes a frozen shoulder. These kind of things. That for me, it's very much about making our lives better, functional movement and awareness, so that we can really look after ourselves and support our students look after themselves. Here is Gwen. She has a little, you can have a look at that later on and see what she has to say. And then, yes, why now? Later is just later. So again, I'll talk a little bit at the end about the booking now has a big advantage of having a long lead time. So there's a very there's a monthly payment plan that's actually available now that would allow you to pay over 15 months. So it becomes much more affordable in nicer, family-friendly bites. That's one of the big reasons for why now. That's the early bird. So just to kind of talk a little bit about what we learn in the course, and then we'll talk a little bit about the structure and then the qualification. So what do we learn? It's broken down into all of these different modules. Asana is exactly what it says in the package. So actually, Katie, do you want to talk about how we teach Asana? Because that might not be so obvious.
As in, like, when we're doing teaching practice, or?
No, as in like what you now know about Warrior that you didn't know before we say look.
Oh yeah, it's cool actually. So it's very, it kind of takes in, so if we're talking about Asana on its own, we don't just learn the pose. So we also learned, like, for Warrior, for example, there's a whole story for Warrior, which I did not know this. And so we looked at the story from Indian mythology, and then we kind of looked at, we looked at, you know, all of the contraindications and how to go through all of these things safely. And we did like the head bit, you know, the researchy bit, for how to teach the pose safely and the alignment in the pose and all of that. But we also looked at the mythology, which I thought was really cool. I now have a whole different take on Warrior, for example. But then when we're talking about alignment, we're learning it, kind of what I was trying to say earlier, that we generally are talking through the poses. We're looking at how it feels for other people, not how it looks. So we do demo as well, but we're also just trying to do it from lots of different perspectives, which is why the group is so great, because we're a really good mix of abilities and experience. So when we're doing it in our groups, we're kind of looking at someone's saying, actually, do you know what, like that was really challenging for me, whereas you could be flying through it, and vice versa. Then there's things that I'm going, Jesus, I was teaching something and I was teaching it myself and we were all wrecked. I was like, oh, here, we'll just come down. I had practiced it a million times, but when I was teaching it, I was like, oh, that was a bit more challenging than I thought it was going to be. So we have the mythology, we have all of the alignment, and like the supporting the students to keep themselves safe. So that we're not just going, this is the pose, and you just do it. But we're also, I was going to say something really important there about when we're teaching it. It'll come back to me. When we're teaching the poses, we're teaching them in groups on Zoom, which I thought would have been, it's amazing how you acclimatize to Zoom, and how actually someone said the other day, was like, oh, we've never actually been in the one room together. And you wouldn't think it, because we really gelled as a group, and we're teaching in small groups. So you don't have to teach it in front of everyone, because that would have been a really big thing for me, like to start out when we start in our teaching practice. It's really small. I think we did it 1-to-1, did we, to start?
1-to-1, yeah.
1-to-1 to start, and then like in really small groups. So it's not very intimidating, particularly on Zoom. It's actually grand. But so we're doing it in small groups. We're giving like feedback to each other very nicely. It's all so lovely, and everyone is really nice, but we're giving really specific feedback. And the language, that's what I was going to say. So in teaching it to other people, there's certain things that people will say, because everyone's coming from different teachers, and there's certain things that people will say that have completely transformed poses for me, like Warrior being one of them. And I can't remember the phrase, but I wrote it down because it was so key, that someone said to me in Warrior, like, I think she said, do you lift through the arch and root down through the ankle, or something to that? And I went, whoa, oh, actually, like, it made such a difference. So it's really cool hearing everyone else's language and how they talk people through poses. And actually there was a couple of girls where their camera just totally froze when they were teaching it, and it just meant that they had to really language their what and we were still able to go through it. We were able to follow their instructions. So it's kind of a different, because for me, with the yoga teachers, it would have always been just demonstrating and we're trying to look like them. But really what we're trying to do is to feel the sensation. What does it feel like? What does good alignment feel like in my body? As opposed to what it feels like in the teacher's body, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's very, again, I think
that's a good description actually, Katie, because it's like in how we're teaching it. So you already know the poses probably. It's unlikely that I'm going to be creating poses that you've never heard of, but it's about noticing, you know, if you take your arm up, are you still connected? Is it still connected to your body, or are you striving to reach a pose? We look at stretch, the whole idea of stretch, but only that's too short tonight to talk about why I don't think we actually ever stretch, but there's a whole load of the science behind where the alignment works, etc. The asana follows directly on from the anatomy. So the first block is anatomy, where we look at the anatomy. We work very much with musculoskeletal anatomy in this course, because obviously that's where most of the function happens. So how does the foot work? How does the knee work? How does the hip work? How does the pelvic floor work? Which is what we're working on at the minute. How does your shoulder work? So that when you are cueing in asanas that you have explored and played with, so you've got a month where you're kind of playing with a particular asana, seeing how it feels for you, depending on how you place your foot in different ways. How does that affect your knee? How does the whole thing integrate? Where do you want to move to and from when you're in that pose? Because a pose is just like a photograph, whereas life is not. Life is a continuous flow. But it's all based around whatever the area of anatomy that we're working on at that time is. So over the year, we gradually work through the entire body and we work through all of the poses. And so everything builds on everything else, all of these kind of bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
So
just the anatomy is not, I thought the anatomy was going to be very intimidating and lots of language that I would have forgotten from leaving cert biology. And it's nothing like that. Like Laura gives us like pictures to color in and stuff. We need to know the mechanics and how everything works. But in terms of like learning off the names of different muscle groups and things like that, it's not as, some people are really into it and that's what they do and they're really loving that element of it, but you don't actually have to learn all of the names of all of the muscles to safely support students in a yoga class. Like you need to understand how it works and what needs to be in alignment, and when you move one way, how that affects another muscle group. But you don't, in case anyone is a bit intimidated by the anatomy, I was, and I actually think it's great. I'm enjoying it because it's broken down very simply. Like if I can understand it, anybody can.
And it's not, like Katie says, it's not about, who cares? We're not doctors. We're not doctors. We're looking to become yoga teachers. So functional anatomy, what is safe, what is sensible? Like, you know, if your elbow moves like this, you're obviously not going to do some kind of odd thing with it, so that you can recognize when it would come under strain, or if someone is injured, how you can support themselves to change their position so that they are secure, safe, and yet not putting extra strain on themselves. And so, yeah, it's very much about functional anatomy, and it's about understanding the body as one piece as well. It's integrated, which is the other thing. We're looking at how if you've a fallen arch, it'll affect your knee, it'll affect your hip, it might affect your opposite shoulder. And so there's this whole integrated effect as opposed to learning things off. That's not where we're coming from at all. I'm really coming from having a functional understanding so that you can support students be safe and that you can be safe yourself. Pranayama, meditation. So pranayama, we work with we'll go through different breaths. The meditation, Sonia, actually have a guest teacher that comes in and she does the meditation with us. Sonia, she's fantastic. The teaching practice and theory and teaching practice, Katie's spoken a little bit about that. It's always about little bite size and practice and building, and a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more, so that by the end you're really confident in holding a class, should that be what you want to do. Also, you will get a template for a starting class, so that you will have over 10 weeks the sample class that you would work with. And I would actually suggest that you use that for the first year that you're qualified, where you just repeat the same 10 blocks, the same 10 classes 3 times over the 3 terms of the year. And that will really embed for you, should you want to do this, really embed for you the whole thing. And it also means that you don't have to be worrying about planning a class for that time. You can take this as a template and you can fiddle with it and change it to suit yourself, but it just means you can focus on the teaching and not be as worried about the next layer. And then the following year, you can layer up and layer up and layer up. Again, looking to give you support so that you are successful as a yoga teacher after the course. And to that mind, I forgot, I missed the philosophy. Well, I'll do the business. So to that mind is the same with the business of yoga. Again, because my intention is that should you choose it, that you can become a successful yoga teacher and actually earn a living. So we introduced the business of yoga very early on, where you're kind of doing little, again, Katie, do you want to say anything about the business of yoga?
Yeah, like it's very accessible. It's not like business jargon. It's really trying to do things in a way that aligns with you personally, aligning your personal and your professional values, I guess. And that's the kind of stage that we're at now. We haven't gotten into maybe it's going to get very technical, but I can't imagine it's going to. It's really about thinking about what would work for you if you were to become a yoga teacher and run your own business as opposed to working for someone else, I guess. In saying like yes to certain things and no to certain things and making sure that they sit right with you, and having authenticity, I guess, in your business. But it's just kind of, well, Laura's teaching is very casual in a very positive way. Like it's very accessible and very easy to understand and digest, and it's bit by bit. And we're actually doing like the same 3 themes over and over again at the moment, aren't we? Just to try and really get familiar. So it's not a case of like looking up your notes to see what should I do here. You kind of have it in you, again, in your body, because it's embodied.
Yeah, and it's about, so I would be arguing that everybody is self-employed because fundamentally we look after ourselves. And even if you are in a paid pensionable job, your own personal development is your responsibility. So looking at that, how do you do that? How do you ask for what you need? And how do you set your boundaries up? And then should you want to, then how do you take a photograph so that you can put a photograph on Facebook? Should you be looking to sell public classes? And getting used to, for me, that was a whole slow process. I did my teacher training, I did it for a couple of years, and then I was like, shoot, I don't know anything about Facebook. I don't want to know anything about Facebook. I'm not interested in Facebook. So for me, it was a mindset thing, getting around that. And now I feel like when I post on Facebook, not when I get someone to do it for me because I'm in a hurry, but when I post on Facebook, it's like a mini teaching for me. So it's the same, I put into that the same energy as I put into teaching a class. So it's a little bit like, here's something that's kind of cool, you might be interested, it's a talk for the day or something like that. So I no longer have that about Facebook. But that takes time. There's a sort of mental shift. So should that be of interest to you, I want to give you the time that you've made that mental shift early, so you're not kind of swimming by yourself when the course is over. And the philosophy ties very much into that. Again, okay, the business side is specifically about business, but the philosophy, go for it, Katie, sure, why not?
I love the philosophy, it's my favorite part. Yeah, it's just, it's okay, so we're using the text of the Bhagavad Gita, but that's really just a small part of it. The discussions around it are my favorite part. So on Thursday nights, we'll have I'm listening to it on Audible because it's too hard to read. So some people are reading it and loving it. I actually listen to it on Audible and follow the text so that I can like write little notes on the page, but I don't really have to take it in. But it's the discussion that we have on Thursday nights around what we've read and how some of us are listening to it going, yeah, I didn't find any meaning from that. And then someone else will say what they thought about it, and it starts this whole process in your head, when you start to really think about what you've read. But it's there's no pressure with the philosophy, because that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid I was going to have to write an essay actually, which wouldn't appeal to me at all. But it's just reading it or listening to it on Audible, and then
but mainly it's the discussion.
Yeah, but seeing what comes up and having a discussion around it, and if nothing comes up, that's grand as well. It's not like this pressure that you have to find some deep meaning in the text. It's just, what came up for you? What did you think about that? And then listening to how other people interpreted parts of it is fascinating. It's absolutely brilliant and so relevant, even though I don't actually know how old it is. I probably should know that, but it's really old, and it's still the stuff that we're like, what we're taking from it is so relevant. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and again, like that, it's really about, it's functional. For me, it's about what is useful. So if you're having a fight with your hubby, can you kind of think, well, am I going to throw all my toys out of the pram and have a little wobbler here, or is it worth having a fight or not having a fight, or what will I do? So for me, it's about being able to, it's like a toolbox, adding to our toolbox. So we have the meditation, we have the pranayama being our breath, how we use our breath. So, you know, this thing, take a deep breath. You can go for a walk, or you can have the kind of thought. So it's accessing it through our brain. Same, to me, it's the same information, you know, so that we can be who we truly are. That's all we need to be. That's all we need to ever be, is just be who we truly are. However, often, you know, we get in our own way, and maybe our self-doubt or our disbeliefs, all these kind of stuff might get in our way of just being who we are. Like, that's all. And for me, I think that's the essence of the entire training, is to support us be who we truly, use the tools that yoga supply, being asana, meditation, pranayama, philosophy, use these as tools to simply just to be, and then by us doing that, empowering other people to do the same. And that's it. Like, there is nothing else. Like, in terms of, sorry, so just in terms of the content, I haven't talked about how we do it or about the qualification yet. Have you got any kind of questions that you want to ask me about the content? You can stop me again in a minute if something comes to you. Okay, so I want to talk about the qualification, because that's what Julie was asking about, and then about how we work it, which is what Valerie was asking about. So in terms of the qualification first, because that's what's in the middle of the screen, I work with Yoga Alliance Professional because they're a UK company, a UK organization. So there is a number of yoga professionals, Yoga Alliances. There's one in America, which I'm also associated with, but I don't run this training through it because the insurance to be a yoga teacher in America and Canada is completely different. So while your qualification does let you work in America and Canada, the Yoga Alliance Professional, which is UK based, their insurance works for everywhere except America and Canada. So that's why I've chosen this organization to work with. There's also an Indian organization. And I think if you Google it, there's probably about 20 of them. But basically, Yoga Alliance Professional 200 hour is your current basic yoga teacher training that is required. It is not state regulated. It is a professional regulation. So to answer your question, technically there's nothing stopping you go out and call yourself a yoga teacher now, but you won't get insurance, and you wouldn't get work in a studio or in anywhere that is sort of looking for a registered yoga teacher. So to get your registration and your insurance as a yoga teacher, you need this 200 hour, typically 200 hour yoga teacher training from one of the yoga alliances. There's also, now it's not only yoga alliances, there's the wheel, the yoga wheel in England. So there's a couple of other ones around, but they're but 200 hour is your standard training. Now, what does that mean? That means that I have to deliver 200 hours, and in different organizations, there's slightly different slants as to the amount of hours that you have to spend on different areas and how much anatomy you might do. I would do more anatomy than a lot because I'm coming from that, from the therapeutic background, the yoga therapy background, and I really I have an effect in my body when I see people making adjustments and suggesting movements to people that are not safe. So I would spend, for me, that's an important aspect so that you can teach safely. Other schools might be more interested in different areas, and they may might use different language, but basically, and how they teach and what they teach will actually be very different. So we're all teaching, say, 40 hours of asana, for example. So for some people, and this is kind of where it's about you finding a match for you, for some people, their instructions on how to do warrior is that you take your feet 5 foot apart. I think it's 5 foot for a warrior, 3 foot for triangle. You turn your foot 45 degrees, your front foot 45 degrees out. Sorry, your front foot 90 degrees out, your back foot 45 degrees out, and you align the heel of the back foot with the arch of, sorry, the heel of the front foot with the arch of the back foot. Now, that is their tradition, that is their approach, and from there, then it just continues very precise. I'm the completely total opposite. I'm like, find it in your body, feel it in your body. Does that feel safe for your knees? So I've trained the yoga teachers to know that knees are very delicate and that knees are very important, so that you are watching them and can see that their knee is out, and then you're supporting them to say, how does your knee feel like in that position? If you were to move your foot slightly differently, does your knee feel safer? Does that feel safer? Oh, it feels safer. Okay, well, maybe that's the place that you want to be putting your foot. So that it's a slower process insofar as you have to support people, empower themselves, as opposed to give strict instructions. But for me, I want people that when they are taking, like I said before, taking a shopping out of the car, or they're lifting their kid, or they're reaching for something, that they're going to be able to do that and notice that people notice before they injure themselves, that they notice this feels off, and then they change in advance of pulling their back or whatever it is. So that's where I'm coming from. So if you were to look at any of the gazillion courses, you'll see that the topics are the same. Now, business, a lot of courses don't include so much business and so much anatomy, although they are words that are now popping into, they become kind of trendy to be popped into the course, things now. But what you do need to do is talk to someone underneath that to see how they teach and if that matches you. It's not, one is not right or wrong. They're just different. And I would be very sad if someone who wanted to do a Ashtanga class and wanted to teach in that way came onto my course, because they would be miserable and it wouldn't suit anybody. So from that point of view, while the qualification you're looking for is the Yoga Alliance internationally certified 200 hours, and all of the topics, all of the syllabuses are going to look the same on paper, I would say really go a little bit deeper than that to see if you like what they're saying. You know, you might be listening to me now and go, your one is for the birds, I'm not interested. And that's fantastic, because now we've all saved a lot of time. But if you are kind of more interested in functional health and feeling better in that way, then maybe I'm the one for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It is the qualification is internationally recognized, like I said, so you can teach anywhere. Your insurance, as a student, you'll get student insurance, and then afterwards you can get you can get full insurance, and that will again allow you to teach everywhere except America and Canada. You can get insurance to cover yourself in America and Canada, but it's extra, it's different insurance, so you need an additional top up your policy. Being COVID world now, you can teach on Zoom internationally, no problem. You can teach in body use, so you could go and deliver your retreats, or you could go as a guest tutor to retreats. So either you bring the people with you there, or you could just turn up and teach retreats there. So in that sense, it's completely international. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So then the question is, okay, that's just a little bit talking about all of them. The question is, how do we put it together? And this is where, and the mentors, I forgot about mentors.
Just then, sorry, just go back to the structure a little bit before you go. Are you required to, do you just then as part of the course kind of teach your fellow course attendees, or do you have to kind of have a number of teaching hours behind you to finalize the course? Or
yeah, fantastic question. And actually what I'll do is I'll do the assessment at this point rather than, so in terms of the assessment and the qualification, the first thing is obviously from having participated, assuming you attend everything and you do everything, then you obviously can get a participation certification.
Yeah. Okay.
In terms
so if you're kind of purely doing it for yourself in your own practice, then that might be as much as you want to get.
It might well be. However, I would if it's, well, I'm going to explain that because it's not so difficult to get the teaching aspect of it. So if it's handy for you, you might as well get it and have it, because sometime you might want to do, you know, in the future you might want to, but certainly that is, yeah, the participation certification is one level.
Yeah.
In terms of the assessment, there are 2 written assessments, one halfway through and one towards the end, and they're personal learning logs where you are really reviewing as you go the whole way through. I'm inviting you to keep a personal learning log, and then halfway through you're kind of doing an assessment. So at the beginning you've kind of set your goals, halfway through you're doing an assessment, where am I at now in terms of what have I learned, what's the story, and then again at the end, well, in November, there again will be a written piece. Those 2 do come into me, but that's as support for you to see for yourself, and also it gives me feedback as well in terms of if I'm missing something or if there's anything, you know, off. But they are like a personal learning log, a personal journal. In terms of the teaching is, in order to be able to teach and for me to be able to stand over you as a teacher, you do need to be a competent teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So what the intention is that all the way through you are building those skills, and that if you run into difficulty, that we address it as it goes, so that by the what's technically called the assessment at the end, by then you're really just shown off. It's like a party day where you get to show off your skills, and and that's it. So during the year, what you've done is you will be teaching, co-teaching. You'll be teaching, again, like Katie says, initially you start with one person, then you'll build up the groups. And then I'm going to be encouraging you, if you want to teach, to start setting up an outside group. And that's the stage that Katie is kind of at now. I'm going to start encouraging them to maybe have 1 or 2 friends that they want to teach. And the way that will work is the first 6 weeks, I'm going to suggest they just, you know, they'll do a centering with them, they'll play with a couple of poses, and then maybe do a meditation or a relaxation, a shavasana at the end. Now, a number of this group actually are meeting themselves independently, so they could use that form if they wanted. If they didn't want to, you know, if they didn't have 2 friends that wanted to do this with them. I'm going to suggest that they do that for 6 weeks. After that, then I'm going to be suggesting that then they start looking as a student teacher, and they start charging, and maybe encourage them again 6 weeks where they've kind of got a beginning and a middle and end. It starts to look a little bit more like a class, and at that point they may or may not be charging, and they may or may not be inviting their friends in. But by the last 6 weeks of the training, that they have that opportunity to teach as a student a bigger group externally that maybe they have marketed for, maybe they have asked their friends for referrals, maybe they have, I'm going to say strangers, people that they don't know come, so that they have that opportunity while they still have the support of the class, of the group, to try it out and to practice. And all of that, in terms of the assessment, it's what I see, which is the final assessment, the final Saturday, when in 2 groups you're going to teach the class. That's one aspect of it, and then afterwards you've got 3 months to set up a class, and then I'll come and, you know, we can video that or get feedback on a class externally afterwards, if that's useful. So that's the teaching aspect of it.
Okay.
As the anatomy goes, there's kind of questions, multiple choice questions at the end of each session, and they're to support you know whether you've understood it or not. Again, if you answer them all right and you're happy out and all made sense, great. But maybe there was one particular module that you're kind of going, I didn't really get that. So it's you go, oh, I thought I understood it, but now I know I don't. So you can go back and watch the video again. So again, the intention the whole time is to get feedback, so that you're continuously getting feedback, so that you can continue to grow and develop, and that if there is a set of skills missing, that we can address it and support you develop those skills as the year goes on, so that you're not like at the end going, oh shoot, I was supposed to do what? I don't know what. I can't project my voice. I didn't know how to control a class. You know, that these things have all been kind of supported during the year.
Yeah, makes sense.
And we're adult learners, you know, so the thing is, every yoga teacher you've ever gone to will have been different, and everybody who's on the training course is going to be a different version of a yoga teacher. What I'm looking for is to support you be safe, competent, and successful yoga teachers in your version of how it is you want to teach, if that makes sense. So allowing yourself, your personality come through. You know, some people might only want to teach meditation. Some people might not want to teach public classes at all. Some people might want to work with in care facilities, you know. So again, that you can kind of have, this is about giving you the foundations from which you can leap.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, I can't believe how long I'm going over time. I apologize. Okay, let me just talk a little bit about, because it's really important, about the time commitment and how that works. I'm sure it's here somewhere, but anyway. The way it works is, so each week, and I'm going to hand over to Katie very quickly, each week you get a recording, or a number of small recordings. The first week of the month, it's anatomy. The second week is practice, because that builds on the anatomy. The third week, pranayama and meditation, because they again link. The fourth week, business and philosophy, because they link. Then each week on a Thursday, we meet where we kind of workshop whatever the drop was during that week. And then once a month on a Saturday is when we meet, hopefully in person, or at least, and actually it's been fantastic on Zoom, where we get to practice and play, and that's where your teaching practice happens. That's when we go deeper into your own practice, your personal practice, and we have that much more space to be.
So it's just 1 day per month.
1 day per month, yeah, just 1 day per month.
It's not a whole weekend per month.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the reason that it's like that, well, actually, Katie, I'll tell you the reason that I put it like that was because what was happening for me was when I would go on my 2-day week and weekend, I would come back on Sunday night. Monday morning, I was scrabbling to get things done. In my case, I had 3 kids, uniforms washed, lunches bought, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. By Wednesday, I was only caught up on myself. And then the month just flew. And suddenly I would be going, shoot, I haven't done the studying, I haven't done this, I haven't done that.
Yeah. So
that's where it's come from, to try and to support, not to have it like that. But sorry, Katie, let me stop talking.
Yeah, because I kind of think the way that it's structured, and initially I was a little bit hesitant, especially because of the Zoom, because it's going to be like our course is going to be mostly on Zoom in reality, but it's actually, it's amazing. It's actually incredible how you can build bonds with people that you have never physically met. It's like we have a WhatsApp group now, and we're meeting on a Monday night as well, just to chat through stuff. That's totally optional. That's just us. Like Laura's not involved in that. But we're all getting on so well, which is, it's amazing. The structure works really well because I think you're kind of fully immersed in it from day one. So you get a little bit of information. So you have your first Saturday, and that's a full day. And then from there, you get like a little bit of information on the learning platform, which is like I don't know, like a Moodle or something, you know, like where you just get a little bit of information every week. That gets dropped down. Then you meet on the Thursday on Zoom and you chat through all that. So you ask your questions, you know, anything that you didn't understand gets clarified. We also have our WhatsApp group during the week that we're like, did anyone watch that? Did anyone find a good explanation of that or whatever? And we're kind of chatting through that. So it's constantly, it's not like, you know, if you do a training course, it's once a month and you do the course and then you've kind of forgotten about it until the month comes around again. And you're trying to remember, what did you do last month? So you're constantly doing a little bit, but it's very manageable. So we have our Thursday night and then another bit gets dropped down. We look at that for the week in whatever way works for you. There's no, I mean, you've got a week to do it, and we're talking there's probably an hour and 15 minutes of actual content over the week. So, I mean, if you did 15 minutes a day, you'd have that bit of it covered. A lot of it is, like, for example, it might be read a certain part of the text. I listen to that on Audible. It might be watch a video. Headphones have been lifesaver for me because then my kids just don't seem to interfere. If I've got earphones in, they don't realize I'm trying to do something that I don't want them involved in. So that works really well. And then the quizzes for the anatomy are very, very short. Like it takes about 5 minutes to do those, really, not even. Yeah, and then the Saturdays are a full day. But for me, that's much more accessible because I don't have to get childcare. And the Thursday nights, I don't have to get childcare because I just put my kids to bed and then I come down and do my course. So it wouldn't be feasible for me to give a full weekend up once a month. That just wouldn't really work. So one Saturday a month and then the Thursday evenings works really well. Then you also have your personal practice, because Valerie, you were asking what's the time commitment. like. So you're looking at, I would say probably between an hour and 15 and an hour and a half of your own kind of work throughout the week in whatever way that works. I mean, you could do that in one block, or you could just do 15, 20 minutes a day. Then you have your own personal practice, which at the moment for us is 10 minutes. That's what we're all trying to do, 10 minutes at some stage in the day on our mat, doing whatever that is. That's fully your own practice. Some people are just meditating in that time. And then you have a class once a week, so your normal yoga class that you would go to anyway. So, and then a Saturday once a month. For me, like I have a not yet 2-year-old, that was the aforementioned screaming toddler, and a 4-year-old.
And you moved house.
Pardon? Oh, and I just moved house as well. Yeah, so I moved house like over every weekend that we've come on. I was like, yes, I'm moving sometime soon, but I'm finally in the new house now. So like I had a lot going on. I also work full time, and my husband works long hours, so he's not really around to kind of support me to do this. I have to carve the time out for myself. But I mean, I'm quite scatty. Don't know if I'm giving that impression. I'm not a very organized person. I struggle with that, but this is very manageable for me because it's very structured. It's a little bit at a time. I'm not being overwhelmed with material or being sent off. I'm like, for next month, you know, read 45 chapters of this book. Like that just wouldn't work for me. I need my hand held. And Laura's very good at hand holding. As are all the lovely people in our group. And hopefully if you end up doing the training, that you end up with a really nice group who'll support each other as well. Because that's kind of the key to the whole thing, is actually just having these discussions with like-minded people. A lot of the learning is done in that, and what you do during the week is just kind of the key to enter there. Yeah, but it is very manageable. My daily practice is something I'd be doing anyway. A weekly class is something I'd be doing anyway. So the only additional bit really is my Thursday night, and then my few minutes throughout the week, which is a little bit of reading or watching a video. So yeah, you had to sacrifice maybe 1 or 2 episodes of something a week, but that's it.
And then there's also then the retreat, which the intention is to have that as an actual retreat. And so in that situation, you get the Friday night, you get to sit around chatting Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, and then go home on Sunday. So to keep that special space, and that we don't have to negotiate too hard with people around, that we can, you know, say this is my retreat weekend. And then again, you can do that. Will be what the syllabus of that will be defined by what people want more of, or whether we just want to take some restorative, some yoga nidra, you know, and have an actual experience of being treated in our retreat.
Mm-hmm. I like the latter.
You better cross. You see, you're coming into it at a better time. You have to cross your fingers for us now that we actually get to go on a physical retreat.
I know. Yeah.
We're all holding out for it.
Thoughts of that is just amazing, isn't it?
But I kind of think even if we had to do it, you know, online, just the way that it has worked so far, it definitely is doable. You know, it's yeah, it's really, I know I'm saying like I'm gushing, but I just can't believe how well this, because I'm actually doing, I did another course last year and we had to do aspects of it online, and it just didn't really work. I mean, it was fine, we got the information, but we didn't really have the same kind of group experience. This is amazing. Like I feel like I'll just walk into the room with these women eventually, and it'll just be like we've known each other forever.
Yeah, I have to say I've been blown away by how it works on Zoom, because I was trying to put it off and put it off and put it off. And a lot of, I was talking to Katie actually about this, a lot of the theory about how we learn actually, because I'm an educationalist originally, that's kind of my buzz, and how to offer people bite-sized chunks, and how that say from a schoolwork point of view, that they should be receiving new information in these bite-sized chunks at home, and then do the practice. And so what we call homework, they should be doing in school, and what they're learning, they should be doing in bite-sized chunks at home, because then different people who learn at different speeds or have different interests can spend more or less time in their area, rather than everybody being sort of stuck at the one, you know, pace, if you know what I mean, in terms of receiving new information and then practicing together. And actually it was Khan Academy about 10 years ago, maybe even longer, who had put this model to me, and I, at the time was a Steiner teacher, and I just refused point blank to listen to him. But I did a lot of reading and a lot of research at the time, and all of his research was saying it was the more effective teaching method. So thanks to COVID, I've had to actually put it in place, and I have to say, I have to eat my words. You know, he was right. For me, it seems to be working fantastically.
Yeah, it's working for us too.
Good. Cool.
Cool.
Have you any other kind of questions? Because I know I realize I'm after taking you over your time. I apologize.
No, I think I've covered everything.
In terms of the early bird, there's a couple of places left on that early bird now. So like I say, that's over 15 months. So it's €160 a month over 15 months. Because it's so early that we can spread the payments like that.
Yeah.
And
what, it starts in September, isn't it?
it'll start in September and run through to June.
June, yeah.
So
okay. But you essentially start paying from now, kind of. Is it to spread it over?
Exactly, which means you can spread it over 14 months.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage of leaping now, as well as obviously it's discounted for discount. Okay. Cool. So qualifications time, Zoom, yeah, a lot of people concerned about Zoom. So I had 2 questions about Zoom. So hopefully we've talked about that enough till the cows come home. Not wanting to teach, we've also talked about that. How many people? There's 14 people on this current course. So we're not talking like 20 or gazillion or 360. I mean, yeah. So it's again, for me, it's all about this personal interaction.
Yeah.
The other thing about the Zoom is, like, if you were doing your Thursday nights somewhere, you've got to commute. So you only have to commute to a room by yourself. And actually, truth be known, like, I'm not always by myself. I often have somebody sitting here on a Thursday night because, you know, they didn't go to bed on time or whatever, and that's fine. There are loads of women in the same situation, or, you know, people walking in and out of the room and stuff, and it's fine. It's not, you don't, there's certain aspects of the Saturday where Laura would state, like, this part is on your own, but it's only a very small portion of the day. So you don't have to feel like you're, because I lived in a really, really small house before this one. So I didn't have a room where I could shut myself away. It was very manageable from that point of view as well.
Actually, can I just share about your last Saturday break, Katie?
Oh yeah.
So just there, I realize I'm well over, so I'm going to stop now. But one of the things that for me, like I said, it's about our self-care and really looking after ourselves and being able to find that space for ourselves in our own lives, never mind in other people's lives. But obviously on Zoom, people were being you know, all the kind of people that want to be yoga teachers are caring people who want to take care of other people. That's what we kind of are. So I overheard someone making reference to the fact that they went and put on a wash.
That wasn't me.
No, it wasn't Katie. It was somebody else. But I was very grateful for that opportunity because I didn't explain. I supported, encouraged that people to take their Saturday and to get somebody else to cook for them, and that they wouldn't be interrupted, because obviously on Zoom we have lots of breaks, you know, because it's too much. So last Saturday was only our 3rd Saturday. What did you do for lunch, Katie?
I locked the bedroom door. First I had a 20-minute power nap. I crammed a lot in. I put on a face mask and had a little nap with my face mask on. And then my husband was in the garden, so I finished that. I washed off the face mask, went downstairs, I made my lunch. I snuck back upstairs and locked the door again. So I ate my lunch totally on my own. And then I was I read a little bit of my book as well, just like totally, like it was like a little retreat. And then I came back down because Killian was still in the garden with the kids, and I took a packet of mini eggs up to the bedroom to eat by myself, so I didn't have to share with anyone. It was great.
Cool.
Yeah. So what I'm really saying is that it's actually working in terms of being able to create space for ourselves, even though, you know, it's kind of middle of a busy life.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sticking with me. And I apologize for going 15 minutes. Oh, it's funny. Katie myself, like, talk about talking for, we get so excited.
She's going to ask someone who talks less to help her with the next one.
But you can, if you have any kind of further questions that you want to chat to me individually, we can set up calls. Otherwise, let me know how you're getting on. And what I'll do is I'll be sending this on anyway as a recording, just in case you want to hear it all again.
And if you want perspectives from like the other students on the course, if you send your question to Laura, she can send it on to me, and I can ask the girls, you know, what their take on it is, because I know like I've got a very specific set of circumstances. Yours might be totally different, and there's a great mix of people. So, you know, if you're in a bit different, if you want a little bit more perspective on that, just send your question to Laura, and I'll ask the girls to give their experience of it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
very
you.
much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. Let me, you know, I'm not going anywhere. So if tomorrow morning you think of a question, you can email me.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Okay, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Bye.